Hi everyone and welcome to Isamu Rat Care. Right, so today's video is going to be a little bit of a seasonal one actually. So this is a video that's all about foraging in spring, and I will say specifically really for the UK, this might be relevant for some areas in Europe. In fact, there may be some common plants elsewhere in the world as well. But I'm only really familiar with the plants in the UK, and actually even then only a small proportion of them. But what I'm basically looking at today is the kind of things that you can go out, go on a walk into the kind of countryside and potentially find and bring back for your rats to eat. And in theory, if you really want to, yourself to eat too. So in terms of foraging, so before we go out and start getting all these kind of lovely plants, the first thing to think about is be prepared. So know where you're going, know what kind of places might have kind of food for you to forage. Probably the easiest place in the UK, and the one I tend to go to when I want to forage, is typically woodland. If it's got a little bit of field and grassland in it, even better, because that gives you a bit more wide variety. If it goes through from kind of like quite thick, dense woodland to quite broken and kind of dappled with lots of undergrowth, the different mix is actually quite useful. That helps you kind of like pick a wide range of plants. So today I've literally been, because we're currently still on lockdown, I've literally been to the wood behind kind of my estate. There's got a little bit of a field there where a lot of rabbits live as well. So that's where I've gone. Now you can go in your own garden. When you're thinking about foraging in a garden, make sure that you haven't treated it with anything, so no kind of weed killers, chemicals, that kind of things, anything that might be unsafe for your rats. You can go in kind of some public places. Try and bear in mind the amount of traffic. So you don't want places with lots and lots of kind of cars going past, because pollution will cling to the leaves. Currently not a big deal because there's not that many cars around, but it can be something that you need to think about. Right, so that is what you want to think about in terms of where to go. You can go to public parks as well. I would just say if they're managed, you have to be aware maybe weed killer and such is being used, but if it's kind of an area that's left wild, that's reasonably safe. I should mention about dogs here. So when you're picking and foraging, a good rule of thumb is try and go back a few layers. So you normally see some quite near a path, and then there'll be some a little bit further and further. You need to keep safe, so you don't want to be clambering and falling over things. You want to be wearing sensible shoes. But if you go back a few layers, the dogs are less likely to have peed on it. Whatever you do get, however, you do need to rinse off. So I've given all these a rinse in the sink under kind of just cold running water for a while to kind of wash away any of the nasties they might have picked up. But it's something to bear in mind, and you're pretty safe doing that kind of thing. Other things, when you're foraging, and this is quite important, it's important that we protect what we're foraging. So what we don't want to do is we don't want to pick everything that's there. Now that means that anybody that comes after us, there won't be anything, and actually the plant will die, so next year we won't have anything. So typically what you want to make sure you do is pick 1 or 2 leaves or flowers from a particular plant. Make sure it's still got plenty left, then go to another patch, pick some more, and so on. So you don't want to over forage, only pick a few and be respectful. You don't want to kind of completely take a plant out, because that's not sustainable. And half the reason we stop forage is because it's quite a good thing to do from that perspective. Right, next, what can we forage? Now these are generally good rules of thumb wherever you are. If it's edible to humans when it's raw, then it's fine. And if you find something like rabbit can eat it, it's generally fine as well. Oh, I've just seen that the rats have found a large bowl of food. I'll just remove it from them. Oh, what have you done? That's a lot of food. Said bowl of food has been removed. They're all looking very disappointedly at me now. I'd missed that I put it on the side out of the feeding cage, and they're now clearing up the mess. Right, so yes, so try and pick things that are edible when raw. What is really useful is you can get books specifically out there to help in terms of foraging, and they'll be quite good because you can get them from a particular country. So I'm only going to look at the ones that I'm familiar with, and I'll be honest, the small percentage of what I found today is nowhere near the limit of the amount of forageable stuff you can get in the UK. But look out for things that are foraging, or books. I've got quite a good book, Collins Herbs and Healing Plants, I think I quite often use, which has whether things are toxic or not in there. If they're kind of down as edible colouring use, then you're pretty safe, but just make sure that they don't have to be cooked to be eaten. But yes, it's always a good thing. If you're not sure, and bear in mind some plants will look like other plants, if you're not sure, don't bother, unless you're with somebody very experienced and you can get them to check it. I should say I'm not very experienced if you're going to come up with a massive list of is this safe. Genuinely, I won't be sure, unless it's something blindingly obvious, which is basically what I've got on this table here. Oh, when I say table, my rack room seat. Yes, so try and make sure, if in doubt, don't. If you're confident, go for it. If you're confident and want to try it yourself, also go for it. Most of these are very good for humans, and that's where I've learned a lot of these off people, books that are talking about stuff for humans. Right, on with what we can find. So I've got a good range here. I'm going to start with the easiest, that is in actually probably most countries, and is something that anybody should be able to recognise, and actually you can find usually in your garden. A common weed. Sorry, I've been stuck to something. So dandelion, very recognisable. The leaf shape, there isn't really anything else, at least in the UK, that I'm aware of that kind of masquerades as dandelion. It's got the classic, I would say most of the clock heads came off in the washing process, they're a little bit damp now. Classic clock head, and then the yellow flower. It's evening here, so the yellow flowers have all closed up. These are an excellent forageable item for rats. They're prolific, there's loads of them, you can grow them because they're weeds very easily. They're also an excellent vegetable for rats. If you can't get hold of kale or something like that, these are a perfectly good alternative. Oh, I've just dropped a flower. You can try them later. The rats are out, as you can tell. I thought I'd get them out and let them sample and see which they prefer later on. But yeah, so dandelion, everybody can find dandelion, very easy. You'll typically find it in grassy areas, you find it in woodlands, you'll find it in fields, you find it by the side of the road. It's one of those things that is prolific. Another thing that is very, very common, I should mention here, dock leaf. So dock leaves are a very broad, these are quite nice looking dock leaves, they quite often end up kind of like rusty brown and holy as they get older. So dock leaves are broad, they're normally found around nettles. If you had the same childhood as me, you'll have been brought up knowing that if you sting yourself on a nettle, you can rub dock leaves on it and apparently relieve the sting. I don't know if it does help or it's just psychological, but I always used to do it as a child and I tend to avoid being stung now. So dock leaves are fine. I find the rats don't particularly love them. If you can get the younger ones, they're apparently more tasty and more suitable for kind of us to eat as well. So I tried to find a couple of nice looking ones today. So I put that there. On the subject of nettles, nope, there. So you can actually feed normal nettles, I should say this, but obviously stinging nettles sting, and they can also sting the rats. So if you're planning to gather some stinging nettles, for a start, wear gloves. Next thing, make sure you boil them before giving them the rats. That destroys the kind of like sting, and it also means that you can give that water as a tea, or you can actually give it to the rats. It's a bit of a treat, some of them like nettle tea, and then you give the remains to the rats. So this is a different type of nettle. So you can see it's still got those nettly leaves. The key is it's got those white flowers. It's dead nettle, always called that. I don't know why, because it's very lively, but it doesn't sting, which is why I'm picking this up. You're ahead of the game there, Wick, not just yet. This is perfectly good for rats. Great little forage for them. They can eat the flowers, etc. So that's quite a good one. Something that also looks quite similar, a similar family, is this. Now, if you notice a little flower here, and these kind of leaves, they also, when they're kind of getting big, are much kind of a yellower kind of leaf, but the same kind of shape. So if you imagine this is kind of a very tall plant, the stem is really tough. I had some fun trying to get it out. They do eventually have these like little seed pods up to the flowers. This is garlic mustard, so giving it a bit of a smell. It's got a slight mustardy kind of smell to it. This is a really good example of something that we can quite often eat. It's an old culinary herb actually, and it's one that a lot of people have kind of forgotten about, but it's really good in a salad, makes good soup, etc. So they do quite like that. Right, so that's the kind of nettle family. Let's try another one. So this is kind of flower heads, and then an example of the leaves. So this is what we call cow parsley. Something that cows obviously love to eat, horses love to eat, rats do quite like as well. When I had rabbits, they used to eat this like mad. We used to regularly pick it for them. Tends to be more fields rather than woodland, but you can find it in woodlands too. No, don't steal the bag. This is my foraging bag. The rats are currently trying to steal it and chew holes in it. Recommendation, bring a bag with you when foraging. I've been meaning to do it for like 2 weeks now, and I just keep forgetting to bring it back. So I finally got round to it. This is a good one. Right. So this plant here, see, it looks quite like the dock leaf that we had before. Oh no, being stuck again. But it's a lot narrower and more pointed. This is sorrel, so that's another good thing for them to eat, and they do get on quite well with that. You often find it around dock leaves and such. So before this like continues to cause me pain in the neck. So anybody recognise this? This is called goosegrass, otherwise known as sticky weed, because it just sticks to everything. Now it's one of those, I've only got a little bit just to see if they like it. I've never had a rat that's particularly liked it before, but apparently it's nicer when it's cooked, but it is edible, so I thought I'll get it to see what they think of it. See whether it sticks to rats, you know, scientific experiment, it sticks to me often enough. Right, another good one. Here we have clover. So this is actually raspberry clover. As a better example, I think it's a really beautiful flower there. When my mum was little, a treat for her would they'd take the flower stems off and suck the nectar out of them when they were children and just sat in the grass. But they're excellent, and you can also do the white clover. I couldn't find any of the flowers, I found quite a bit of the actual clover. But clover leaf is quite famous, kind of like your little trefoil. If you find a 4-leaf clover, extra lucky. The raspberry clover ones, interestingly, are more kind of pointed than the kind of rounder white clover leaf, but they're very common, very popular, lovely green for rats, something that's got kind of health benefits and such as well. Right, my favourite, and the reason that I kind of often go foraging in spring, what we have here, this little flower here, this is wild garlic. It is infinitely recognisable just from the smell. It smells strongly of garlic. In fact, if you've ever walked in a woodland in spring, bloody sticky weed, if you ever walked in a woodland in spring and you smell this massive waft of garlic, that's because the wild garlic is out, and it has these beautiful star-shaped flowers. I mean, they really are nice, and you can eat those. You can make a nice pesto out of them, apparently, in a soup. Make a good salad leaf, and the rats do tend to quite like those usually. I will say I don't know how many of the rats here, they're probably the ones that are over a year will have had wild garlic from last year, but it's only something you can do about like just once a year. It doesn't last that long. You've got maybe a week or 2 of it and then it's on its way. So that's partly why I've done this kind of foraging thing, because making the most of the fact there is wild garlic right now. For that, it is in woodlands generally. It tends to be in the bit of the woodlands where the leaves are breaking up a little bit, so there's a bit more sunlight, and it just comes up really quickly. You'll see the leaves first, then the flowers go and kind of like almost explode like little fireworks, and you get the smell, and then very, very quickly the flowers die, the leaves die, and you don't see it again for another year, which is very sad. Final things on here, I think I've covered most everything else, is plantain. So we have 2 different types of plantain here. They do have various different names, but the names that I know them as, this is what we call greater plantain, and the flower is quite distinctive. You see they're kind of like little, almost like a sparkler I suppose. Greater plantain, and then we've got lesser plantain here, which is a much wider, broader leaf. One of the things that makes kind of it quite clear is how veiny they are, and actually when you kind of like cut into it, it kind of has almost like celery type texture. These ones have a flower that I couldn't find any of, apparently they're not growing at the moment, that look almost like rat tails, and they're very good for rats, tend to go down quite well. Wick has decided that she now wants to, oh no, she's found the food. Yeah, they don't mind plants, but they would rather eat their own food. Right, so I thought I'd see what they make of them. To be honest, I'm probably not expecting them to be hugely eating of them right now, mostly because they're on free range and food is usually the last things on their mind. But it's quite interesting giving them the different smells. Oh, the wild garlic's been popular. You just lick it. You're meant to eat it, Chocobo. Yes, like that. Chocobo has had wild garlic before. Do you want a flower? It'll look very pretty with you. Oh yes. No. Just sniff it. If nothing else, it's quite good for enrichment, but what I'll be doing is I'll split this up against the various groups in the room at the moment, and they'll all have a little bit overnight. What I could also do, particularly with something like wild garlic that only comes up rarely, is pick a load and then dehydrate it and add it to my mix. Really, it's quite fun. It's nice going out there with your little bag, make the most of your daily exercise, and kind of like enjoy the outdoors. There is a lot you can get from outdoors. What I've got here only represents like spring. If you're talking about autumn, if you're talking about kind of even just foraging from branches and such, I should do a video on branches really, since they're so important to my setups. It's just a nice thing to do, and I quite enjoy doing it. And the rats quite enjoy the output, even if it's mostly just sniffing and probably weeing on them a bit. Most interesting, the dead nettle. You've not had one of those before, have you? But yes, so it is. Yeah, I'm just trying to find where I've put this food. Everybody's plaguing me. Oh, Clover. The first winner is Clover. Chocobo is actually eating that. Oh, and cow's parsley now from Berko. But yes, so it's a bit like a bit of a treat really, letting them try new things. But it's not the food moving. Yes, I can see it. Don't fall off there, Missy. Right, so I shall end there and try and fish up the rest of the rats and save my hand from moving, digging through it to get to the food. You've just pulled this off my microphone. I best go and repair my microphone as well. So bye for now, and good foraging.